It's the My First Gig podcast, whoa. Sharing stories of first gigs and shows. Comedians sharing their memories. The fun and entertaining, exciting and crazy. With Duane, Doogan as your host. It's the My First Gig podcast, here we go.
Here we are. We're back. That was a lovely jingle. I've missed it, even though I listen to it most days for the last 2 years. But wow, hello, welcome back. Thank you for joining for the first time, most likely. It's very hard to keep podcast listeners when you've had a 2+ year break. But if you have listened to episodes before and you're back because you go, was I subscribed to this? And then Joe Lycett pops up and you go, oh, we might check that out. That sounds good. Welcome back. Yeah, it's been a long time. I was always sure it was going to come back. I guess I didn't think it would be this long. So, a little backstory on the podcast, a refresher for those who've listened, and a story for those who haven't. This kicked off in January of 2020. I wanted to do 10 episodes per season, and I did, and that finished 10 weeks into 2020, which was the week before lockdown hit. And then we had this brand new free time, and we thought it would just be a little while. So I went straight into season 2, I think almost either 2 weeks or even just a week later. And they were all remote podcasts done with people from America that I wouldn't probably get the chance to listen to. And I was very against remote podcasts before that, but then they became like a big thing with the pandemic, so I went with it. But I still didn't really like it. It was early in the thing. You know, it's weird now even saying this, but 2 years ago, to do a video podcast on your computer wasn't unheard of, but it was quite rare. So if you call up somebody and be like, here, can you turn on your Skype there? They'd be like, huh, what? I'm sitting in me bathroom doing this. So I didn't do any videos. So they were all audio, and I just didn't feel like I connected with people as well as the face-to-face. Maybe it's the same. Maybe they're both of a pretty shite standard. But for my own personal, whatever the hell, I just thought I want to do these in person. I'm going to wait and come back. And I think I did 8. Didn't even get to the 10. I had a corrupt audio files that lost a few, which have since been recovered, and that had older in-person ones as well, with some really good guests. So they're going to be coming up in this season. Thank God. I'm going to have to email them and be like, hey, do you remember we did this before the pandemic? Or do you remember we did this during the pandemic? Yeah, it's coming out next week. And I'm like, what? Who are you? Like, I've retired. I've changed my name. I live in Mexico now. But no, they're going to be coming out. And I thought I'd wait until we came back. And I don't know where you're living, but in Ireland, we came back for like about 6 weeks in late 2021, like 18 months later. We didn't have the summers opening and we had indoor dining and stuff like that for like, it was a 90-minute, you had to have food. Like, shows didn't come back until late 2021. And then we shut down again straight away until early 2022. So it's only in the last, it sounds mad, but it's only in the last 6 months that we're fully back. So I've spent the last 6 months, not even 6 months, because I had to wait for comedians to travel and start touring again. So that was always a couple of months behind. So look, it's crazy that it's 2.5 years later, but it's, you know, obviously we all know about the pandemic, but with the fact with touring comedians, they've only started coming to Ireland in the last maybe 4 or 5 months. So I've been collecting, and we're here. And what a great first guest. I said his name already, Joe Lycett. That's a thing in podcasts that's funny. People go, our guest today is, drum roll please. And you're like, yeah, it was in the episode title. It's the reason I downloaded it. I've actually skipped your voices because I've never listened to you or your podcasts. Don't know what your name is. Get me to the person I know, please. So it's Joe Lycett. We recorded this when he was in Dublin doing his show More, How Do You Lycett in Vicar Street. I think he did 3 nights or 4 nights. What an amazing show. The tour's coming to an end now, but he's filming it soon. So I'm guessing there'll be Amazon Prime or Netflix or some streaming deal. Get on that. He asked people not to tell what the show's about, and for good reason, because there is a pretty serious and constant thread throughout it. I thought it was amazing. I went to the show twice. I just wanted to see it again. One of the best full shows I've ever seen. Certainly in person, up there. It was brilliant. He was a great chat. I loved when I emailed him asking would he do this. Obviously I'm emailing a lot of these people cold. Some people I know or have crossed paths with, and you can use that being like, hey, we met at this thing. Never spoken or met Joe Lycett before. So I emailed him anyway, and his response was great. He didn't have to say it, but he was like, fuck it, okay, why not? I think it was a case of going, I'm there for 4 nights, might as well do a podcast. But he was so nice then when we sat down, a great chat, and very nice. Very nice. Just, sometimes people are in and out, and that's fair enough. They're doing me the favor, they're giving me the time. I'm getting a lot more off of their name than they're getting being on this podcast. So when people go out of their way to be sound, it's really cool. As I've been a big fan of his for a long time. So what a great guest to kick off season 3. I don't know what I've been up to. I used to do little chats in this opening bit, and I listened back to a few of them before recording this, because I've forgotten them. I don't like listening back to myself, even with the interviews when there's other people there. I'm not mad onto that. So the bits of me at the top and at the end speaking, no. So I listened back to a few, just going, what did I actually speak about? And one that I found quite nice and interesting was my cat had turned 20, and I did a rundown of all the old cats, the oldest cats ever. And I remember somebody came up to me recently enough. So basically the reason I'm saying, I should address, if you're watching on video, not all episodes are going to be on video, because, as I said, a lot were recorded beforehand, and also it depends on the situation if I can get video or not. I'm going to try and get video as best I can, and I have been, but video's not a guarantee. We have a video today. It's in a low, dark room, but it's there because I know people watch podcasts on YouTube now. I do it myself. And that's that. I am in some sort of Soviet prison here, if you're watching on video. If you're not, picture a Soviet prison, and it's actually not that quite bad. Oh, what was that about? Yeah, my cat. So my cat, Kitty, turned 22 in May, and then we said goodbye to her a couple of days later. And we knew we were going to, and when they're that age, all you think about is right, am I going to walk in and find her? Is she going to go missing? So it was going to happen one day, and it was very nice to know, as hard as it was. And I had recordings of her as a joke. I'd go up and she was a very talkative cat anyway. So all I had to do is put the microphone next to her and talk to her, and she'd meow away. So there was, I'd forgotten, and probably would never realize that there's a whole intro I do where I pretend I'm talking to her, but it's just what she meows away. So yeah, it was May that she passed away. So finding that was really nice. So if anybody's got anything out of this podcast, it's not going to be the listener. It's not going to be the guest. It's me, and it's listening to a recording of me. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. What's new with the podcast? It's now powered by Acast. I don't know what that means, but I'm very glad to be a member of the Acast family. So many podcasts I listen to are part of Acast, and as much as I'm annoyed every time I listen to a podcast and then you hear the little doom and it goes into an ad, I now kind of love that sounds in this podcast. So if you hear it, please listen to the ads, because that means we can raise enough money to get me out of this prison. Bail ain't cheap. So it's the exact same. If you're subscribed, you subscribe any old way. just Acast, and there'll be a couple of ads at the front and back, and one in the middle. Hope you don't mind. They're quite short. I put them in places that aren't too intrusive, and but if you listen to them, please do, because they help out the pod. If you watch it on YouTube, you kind of get away with that. If you hate ads so much, and you want to go ad free, and you want all of the old episodes ad free, then you can sign up at our Patreon, patreon.com/myfirstgigpod. For just €1 a month, you get ad free episodes, and you actually get the episode 24 hours earlier. But if you want to support properly, because €1 actually doesn't do anything, €1 is just about building a brand. All right. So know that while it's nice that you're given €1 and you're getting the benefit out of it, I'm not getting the same benefit as you. Okay? And can you really live with yourself if you know that for the sake of €1? You know, it's the case. You're basically given a 20-cent tip in a restaurant. It's like, I'd prefer no tip. That's not true. Please subscribe for €1. I really want people to just hear these things. And yeah, I'd love a 20-cent tip, to be honest. But jokes aside, if you want to support the podcast, you can support €5 a month, and that will get you 48 hours early. That will get you ad-free episodes of the old ones. That will then get you bonus questions with our today's guest, Joe Lycett. There's bonus questions with inaugural guest, James Acaster. Bonus questions with anybody whose questions were edited out or I recorded special questions with this in mind. There's bonus episodes that aren't under the My First Gig banner, but fun chats with people like David O'Doherty, Adam Buxton, I can't remember who else, but some fun people, Mark Watson. There's fun chats with them. They'll be going up over the next couple of weeks sporadically. There'll be bonus episodes. My favourite Irish comedians and friends of mine from the Irish comedy scene, I'm going to be recording their first gig stories, and you'll get to hear them. I think there'll be 2 of them a month, maybe fortnightly. If I record enough, maybe weekly. Oh, I'll tell you this. If there's enough Patreon members, I'm not going to set a number on it because, to be honest, I'll do it if there's 5. But I don't want to say 5 and let you know that I don't have 5 yet. There's none yet because this is the first episode. But if we get to €60,000 a week on Patreon, well, I'll do it weekly. If we get to €60,000 a week on Patreon, I'll do an episode hourly. I'll just go on to people in the street being like, what's the first time you did something? What are you into? Horses? When's the first time you ate hay? Okay, yeah. Now I'm doing impressions. Potentially not racist, but I don't know. Let's just not. Once the words potentially racist come out of your mouth, I think it's time to stop. Especially when we're talking to such a fun guest. So if you're watching, that's my wave. If you're listening, thank you so much. As I said, patreon.com/myfirstgigpod. Or if you want to support us for free, twitter.com/myfirstgigpod, instagram.com/myfirstgigpod, youtube.com, search myfirstgigpod. And just, if you like this, just tweet about it, Instagram it, put it on your stories, and just say, this was fun, you'd recommend it. I'm a little old boy trying to tell stories of the people we love. And if you can't even support that, that's fair enough, really. I'm fairly selective with the stories I put up. So, thanks to Acast Plus. No, not Acast Plus. That'll come later. Thanks to Acast for powering this podcast. Thanks to Joe Lycett for his time. Thanks to Vicar Street and Aiken Promotions for the space. And thanks to you for listening. So sit back, relax. Enjoy the silence as we now come down. And I say, welcome to my first gig with none other than Joe Lycett. Take it away.
Silly amount of... John McNally does 700 nights a year here.
Yeah.
But for me, just to do one here was kind of ridiculous, and to be doing 4 in a row is really cool. I feel cool.
Yeah.
I'm not cool, but I feel cool.
It's the comedy venue, I think, in Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Growing up, it's like all the DVDs were from here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But I did like your first time coming around, or at least the first time I noticed you come around, was at Whelan's.
Yes, I did Whelan's, which, if I'm right, is that like a standing gig? I think the audience was standing,
Really?
at least in some of it. There's one that I did where I did a tour show and the people were standing, and I thought this isn't going to work, and actually it did. I think that was here.
Well, so I run comedy nights in Whelan's, and if you use the downstairs room, you'll get like maybe 5 rows, and then standing.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Because it's like a wide room, so like the back of the room's only like 10 feet away from you.
And standing, I quite like it when I see comedy standing, like standing audiences, but it's not common.
Well, you need like a really tall stage, I'd say, because if they're like up to your chest, it could be very strange.
Yes,
but no, so Vicar Street and Whelan's, those are the cool venues here.
Yeah, so it's really good. It's just really good for comedy.
Yeah.
Both Whelan's and Vicar Street. I'm trying to think of any others. I mean, I've done Laughter Lounge, and I actually did International for the first time ever.
That was recently, wasn't it?
Last October. I was here filming Travel Man. We've done a Travel Man here, which hasn't gone out yet, with Marwan Rizwan. And I'm good friends with Johnny Camden, who's a brilliant stand-up, and he was playing the International. So I said, I'll come and watch you. I just went with the intention of watching. And then they sort of strong-armed me into doing 10 minutes. And actually, I thought, do you know what? I've always wanted to play the International, so why not? And loved it. We had a really nice time.
I used to help run that place before the pandemic, and there was a great night where Dylan Moore brought his son in, and his son was urging him to be like, he showed him during the day, this is where I started. He's like, right, go up on stage tonight, And he's like, no. And eventually he came back during the show and was like, hey, look, I'm going to jump on, just do a quick little set. And I remember the girl at the door was just like, the only way you're getting in here is by paying €13. I'm sorry, we're full. €13, please. So,
wow.
Did you have to pay?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
so
there you go. So
I've done better than Dylan Moore.
Maybe you are cool now.
Maybe I'm cool, actually.
That's the barometer.
Take that, Dylan. Well, I've got beef with Dylan Moore, and I've never met him, but I used to work in a theatre in Manchester selling ice creams, and he was performing, and how did it transpire? I was like in the stalls, keeping an eye on the audience in the stalls, and was given expressly told, if anyone's filming or taking photos, you have to go and shine a torch in their eye to distract them and stop them. And that happened. Someone in quite close to the front started filming, and so I went and shone a torch in their eyes or whatever, and then was asked in the interval to go and work on a bar or something, or just not be there because Dylan had been distracted by me and didn't want me there. And I was like, well, that's what I've been asked to do. It's expressly been told to do that. So I was annoyed. But actually now as a comic, I'm like, oh yeah, that would have been really distracting. It was probably someone from his team who'd asked him to do that. And I now understand, but I maintained beef and maintain beef to this day. So to hear that he was denied access has made me delighted.
Yeah. Well, I love the explicit, like, in their eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not just to get their attention.
Blind them, essentially, yeah. But also,
don't let them see any of the show.
Exactly. When you're doing a gig, even if it's in a theatre like the Palace in Manchester, particularly the stalls, you can see them. And if someone's having a light shone in their eyes, you can definitely see that. So I don't know where... I'd obviously been given a bum steer, but I didn't like that he'd sort of expressly asked me to be removed. I thought that was rude.
I'll go around the audience tonight and do it for you if you want.
Yeah, if you could, yeah.
Front row only and the eyes.
Just blind them, yeah.
Well, to go back now and get into your first ever gig, if I say what's your first memory of comedy, what springs to mind for you?
The first memory of comedy,
or earliest, rather,
it would probably be in the car with my mum listening to Victoria Wood on cassette. There's an old show of hers that mum had on cassette, and finding that sort of painfully funny, like just laughing so much. There was a joke that she had about going to H&M or one of those shops, and she was complaining about the clothes not being for someone of her size, and that she would get there and that the shutters would come down, and that, I just always thought that was a really funny idea, that like poor Victoria Wood stood outside with the shutters come down. So that was probably the first one. And then we listened to we watched Lenny Henry and Lee Evans and people like that. So there was comedy around, and my dad loved Only Fools and Horses, so that was often on, and a bit of Blackadder, that kind of thing. So there's a kind of lot of iconic sort of British comedy. We didn't really have any American stuff, I think. I don't think that was easily available at that time anyway.
Yeah, I don't think until like Sky really kicked in did stuff start to get shown, really.
Yeah, so it was all the classic British stuff, you know. Bit of Billy Connolly, that kind of thing.
So yeah, tapes and cassettes and watching on the telly. So like, there's comedy exists growing up.
Yes.
Did you ever, before starting out, did you ever go out seeking out live comedy or go attend anything?
No, and the first time I did it, I think it was the first time I did it, I remember just being amazed by it, and it really sowed the seed, and I sort of couldn't believe how good it was. And it was at the Glee Club in Birmingham. I went with all my old, well, still they're not old friends. Well, they're old friends, but I'm still friends with them, if you know what I mean. And George Egg was on, who was brilliant, and I remember really laughing at George. But then Tom Stade closed, and it was when he was doing his routine about the meat raffle in Wolverhampton. It's a sort of iconic Tom Stade routine, which I think is on YouTube somewhere, and it's just so funny, and was just in pain laughing. Just thought it was absolutely extraordinary. And all of my friends were laughing way more, and I thought I was sort of funny, and they were laughing way more at him than they ever did at me. And I remember feeling like, oh, I'm funny though, like sort of being a bit annoyed that they were finding him, even though I was finding he was objectively incredibly funny, just being a bit pissed off that they weren't finding that they would never find me as funny as they did him. And so it kind of started this sort of psychological thing of going like,
jealousy started to brew.
Exactly, yeah. And just thinking about like how amazing it would be to do that and to be a stand-up comedian. Never in a million years thought I'd ever have the confidence to do it or be good at it. So I sort of still to this day don't quite know how that happened.
So you mentioned earlier about working in the theatre in Manchester. Had you done comedy at that point?
Yes, I think so. Yes, it was around that period when I got that job, when I did my first gig. And it's interesting. The first gig. Shall we talk about the first gig?
Yeah.
The first gig is up for debate, really.
Yeah, and often there's a lot of people have either one that they don't want to mention, or there's
I sort of don't want to mention it, but I've mentioned it loads in the past.
Yeah.
But I don't want to mention it in the sense that like I'm annoyed about what happened, but I think also it's sort of integral for my journey that I had to go through a huge public humiliation, essentially. And it was when I was working at the theatre, so it was around when I was 19 was when I started doing comedy, and I was working at the theatre at university, not really enjoying university studies. Theatre was perfectly nice. I really enjoyed that job in lots of ways. My friend said, I'm going down to the Comedy Store to watch King Gong, which is for non-connoisseurs of comedy, it's a sort of new act night where people go up and they try to get to 5 minutes, but the audience have cards. There's 3 audience members that are given cards, and if all of the cards go up, they're gonged off. And so it's this sort of slightly bear-baiting-y thing where people give it a go. And
self-advertised as the most brutal open mic comedy night.
Yeah. And it's it really sort of hones you as a new actor in some ways.
Don't tell me this is the first time you got on stage.
Yeah, so I went and I got very drunk on Magners, and it was Mick Ferry who was comparing, who was brilliant. And the standard had been, as I remember, not that good. And I remember thinking, I'm funnier than this. And Mick Ferry then said, does anyone in the audience want to give it a go? And I was thinking, I could do better than that. And I think I must have been toying with the idea of doing stand-up at that point, because I had one joke in my head. And so I said yes. And he was like, come on then, up you come. And
even that, like the fact that the audience know that you're from the audience.
Yes. And my one joke was about Madeleine McCann, and she'd only just been abducted, as far as I'm aware. Like it was in the public consciousness, you know.
Yeah.
And I just said, has anyone in the audience? It's funny. I've talked about this, and I've talked about it because it's true and what happened. And recently the Sun ran an article about it being like Lycett's shame about Maddie or whatever. And I definitely wouldn't do that joke now, but that's because I'm, a much better comedian than I was when I was pissed on Magnus going up having never done stand-up. And I thought that's what comedy was. I thought it was like saying something controversial or whatever.
Yeah.
And I went up and I said, just before I start, can everyone have a quick look for Madeline? And the audience sort of went, ooh, like they didn't trust me with that. And then I sort of panicked and sort of pointed at the sign behind the stage which says comedy store, and I was like, it's comedy, guys, and then I sort of started flailing a bit, and then I didn't have anything else. So I was like, I just walked off. Like I just sort of realised I got nothing else. And
so
because
technically, you didn't get gonged off.
No, that's true.
It's still going on.
A sort of self-gong. Yeah, it's probably the longest set anyone's done.
You only have to do 5 minutes. You've done 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. And because I was so drunk, I fell as I came off the stage as well. So it was a sort of stumble, and then went back to my seat. And then my face was really hot, and everyone was looking at me, and my friends didn't want to be next to me, and the whole thing was humiliating. And then we were on the bus on the way home, and a lot of the people who'd been at the gig were also on the bus, and they were embarrassed for me, and the whole thing was just like, I just felt really mortified. And I remember waking up the next day, and I sort of rang mum and was sort of felt embarrassed to tell her, like, I've been, I almost felt like I've been cancelled. I just felt like really ashamed. And I think that sowed the seed of kind of going, I've got to prove all these people wrong, all the people in that room, I've got to prove them wrong. I can do this.
So not too dissimilar feelings from when you were at the Glee Club. It was almost trying to.
It's a lot of proving people wrong. Yeah.
How long before this would have that going to the Glee been?
Probably a year or so. So it was all around a similar time.
Yeah, and you're kind of having the thoughts and kind of thinking about it. You go up to university then, and I guess a lot of these kind of opportunities then kind of.
Yeah,
there's a lot of creative people around.
Yeah, the timeline is sort of a bit blurry, but it must have been actually in my head. It's like, I was thinking about it for 5 years, and then I didn't do anything for another 5 years, and then actually it was probably all happening within about 2 years, a space of about 2 years. And then what did happen is I did that Gong show, which I think was sort of later on in the year, the year when I was probably 19 then as well. It's probably sort of October-y, November-y time then. And then in the new year, in February, this audition came up to do some stand-up as part of a charity gig that one of the students was running. And a lovely girl called Eleanor Tom, who's a great friend of mine still and a very funny person. And I auditioned and I rehearsed the thing. I wrote it properly and all that. And they liked it. And then I actually worked with Camille Uchan, who was also at Manchester University, who was part of a group called Lady Guard, and they're now known as Birthday Girls. There's slightly fewer of them now, and worked with her, rehearsing it, rewriting bits, whatever. So I'd properly kind of knew my set back to front, so that when I went out, I knew what I was doing. And I went on after Jack Whitehall, who was really sort of making waves at that point. He'd sort of just done Edinburgh. And
this is that first gig?
So official first gig, yeah. Yes.
So what are we talking about? You say like a charity thing, but obviously.
So that was also at the Comedy Store. It was sold out. So it's about 400 people.
Wow.
And
back onto the stage as well.
Back onto the stage where I died on my arse. So it was kind of a weird catharsis. And it went really well.
Were they looking for someone who had never done it, or were they just looking for?
They're looking for anyone, really.
Somebody,
yeah. People at university who wanted to give it a go.
Yeah.
Basically. They just wanted to fill out that bill. And
well, so what do you do for the rehearsal then? Do you put together a set before you go in?
Yeah, basically. And we were sort of just rehearsing that set and just doing lots of trying those jokes out, and yeah.
So that's wild. That's like almost like there's 3 first gigs going on here now.
Well, yeah, because I was studying drama and English, so that the drama people, like Camille was a drama student as well, and Eleanor was. So there was a real sense of like, you write a script and you perform it and you rehearse it. So we sort of treated it a bit like theatre.
So so performing wasn't too out of the realm then for what was going on.
No, of course, yeah. So I'd done theatre-y bits and I'd auditioned for stuff and didn't get loads. I'd had a little part in a musical at uni and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd been on stage a few times before. But yeah, that was like my first stand-up, official stand-up gig.
So we're talking the Comedy Store, 400 people. This charity event, Jack Whitehall. Do you remember who else was on?
So Birthday Girls are as they were known, Lady Garden. So they were doing sketches. There was a guy compering who was brilliant, whose name has escaped me. There's a poster for it somewhere, and I think that actually quite a lot of them do still work in comedy. But I'm scrambling around for names now. But there were lots of very funny people. It was a fun night. It was really good.
I'm almost like curious now about a couple of gigs in, and your smallest audience is still 400 people.
Yeah.
So you're very prepared for this set.
I'm very prepared.
You've got you've kind of people helping you. You're going on after Jack Whitehall. When Jack's on, do you remember how you're feeling? Or
terrified?
Yeah,
because I thought I was going to be humiliated again, and there were more friends in this time.
Any from the gong?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, it was my friend Ed, who
we'd like to see it more.
Yeah, funnily enough, Ed is now my director, and he's a brilliant director, and he directs my stand-up shows. So we've come full circle on that one, and it's quite useful for him because, like, if I ever get like a bit of a bee in my bonnet or whatever, is that the right term? Not bee in my bonnet. If I ever get above my station, he'll be like, "Do you remember that first gig?" Oh, fuck yeah, like, it sort of takes me back there immediately. So there's also in that audience was a guy called Ali McDowell, who is a theatre writer now, a very successful theatre writer, who still lives in Manchester. And I'd worked with him on a film that he'd made, and he was a real, like, a really excellent writer, but really kind of loved the craft of the thing, and was perfectionist isn't the right word, but really respected stuff that was good. And I felt like I would probably struggle to impress him. And he spoke to me for quite a long time after that gig and said, like, "That was really brilliant, Joe. I think you could have a good go at this." And I remember that being really being so excited by that, that someone has sort of gone like, you keep exploring this because you've got something here. And then there were other. I mean, Manchester was a brilliant place to be doing stand up around that time, and still is. So I just became addicted to booking gigs in, and I loved seeing them in the diary and knowing that I was in demand.
Going into that show, was there further, like, maybe conditionally, right, if it goes well I might do more, but like, or was it just, right, that's the show I'm working towards? It could be a one and done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just experimenting essentially,
trying something out,
but also trying to prove to myself that I could do it. And then I think what I realized was that, like, I got the laughs, but I didn't feel confident in it. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was fluid on stage or entirely myself, but I did the script and I did it well. And I think that, but I loved the buzz of the laugh, loved it. And I think what I wanted was more of that, essentially. I didn't overthink it in terms of, like, what I think all the goal, the dream was to be someone like Tom Stade, where I was playing clubs and my job was that. That's all I wanted. I didn't ever dream of doing my own tour shows or doing telly or anything like that. I just thought that was beyond the realms of possibility for someone like me. Didn't ever think that was going to happen. But I just thought I didn't want to work in a job. I didn't want to have, like, 9 to 5, didn't want to be in an office, didn't want any of that. And so it was the first thing that I kind of thought was potentially viable, that I might be able to scrape some money out of.
Well, I say certainly, doing drama in college, you're looking for some outlet at the end. So
yeah,
I guess, if this ticks those boxes. What are your memories of...
Thank you.
Oh, you're going. What are your memories of being on stage that night?
I don't really have memories of it. That's the weird thing about it. I don't remember looking out into the room. I remember Jack Whitehall coming off and saying to me, "Oh, there's a guy on the front right who's a bit heckly, but I think I've dealt with him. I don't think he's going to go again." And I remember being like, I don't know what to do if he goes again. What the fuck do I do with that information? But sort of feeling like protected by Jack, that he'd kind of said that and sort of said, "Oh, there's someone who's in the way, but, like, don't worry about him." But yeah, beyond that, I had no idea what the fuck was going on. And then, what's weird about it is that there was a recording of it, I'm fairly sure, that I was given afterwards. And I've got more memory about the recording of the gig because I watched that more. So weirdly, all my memory is of, like, watching it from a sound booth camera.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Strangely.
very much the way it kind of replaces. Because even without the recording, it's almost like just you go up, you blank, you walk off stage. Kind of a
Exactly,
thing.
yeah. You kind of in it too much to kind of think about how it's going. And then it was fine. And then I couldn't tell you when the next one was, but I then was just obsessed with getting gigs. You know,
And just well, I guess there's enough people around that you can kind of sound out, right? What do I do? Who do I talk to?
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, you have to do you still have that recording somewhere?
I think it's somewhere. Yeah, it must be. Yeah, I think I put it onto YouTube. I don't think it's available now, but it might still be in the depths of my hidden YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And yeah, I should watch it and see. Well, I mean, I don't. It could be awful. I don't know. I mean, I think it probably is awful. I don't think I'd do any of the material in it now. I did end with a number. I did a song at the end.
Oh, wow.
Where I did a version of "Drop It Like It's Hot," but where I wore a top hat and it was "You're a Filthy Peasant," and it was me pretending to be sort of rich person going "You're a filthy peasant," you know, just sort of being very and calling all the audience peasants essentially.
That's straight out of the drama college there.
Exactly, and when some of my drama sort of associates came to later gigs, they were like, "Oh, I loved that number," and I was thinking, the Frog and Bucket in Manchester would not love that number.
So yeah, so like how long are you still in university then before you finish up after starting comedy?
Yeah, well, I was in my second year, so I did another year at university. But to be honest, I tapped out by that point. The course at university was not great. I felt sort of slightly abandoned by Manchester University. I didn't feel like they kind of gave a shit. Really.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of my fellow people who were on the drama course particularly felt the same, that it was a kind of, there wasn't a lot of contact hours and they didn't really seem to care about any of the extracurricular stuff. And there were some excellent people there, but I wasn't fussed about being part of an institution. I never have been, and I still don't really, you know, I sort of still resent having to kind of work for any institution because I don't like rules and I don't like the kind of stuffiness of the traditions of the way these places work. And but I'm also very kind of agreeable and affable, so I will end up kind of working for those places. But always my favourite and the thing that I love about stand-up is that it's entirely mine and there's no one getting in the way. And I take advice from people, but it's up to me whether I take that advice. You know, I'll listen to advice, but it's up to me what I do. And once you're up there and I'm doing it and it's up to me. And that is a rare thing in the arts. Because even if you're, you know, a brilliant musician, you're probably having to deal with a label and they're deciding which tracks go in which order and how to promote it and all of these different things. And with stand-up, once you're in front of an audience, it's on you and that's it. And you haven't got a set, like a track list. You can break that track list and your band isn't sort of going, what the fuck are we doing? You know, it's all on you. And I love the freedom of that and the creative possibilities of that. And there's to my mind, there's no other art form like it. I don't think any other art form would satisfy the creative itch in the way that stand-up does.
See, it's funny, yeah, because like that's a kind of a common response when if someone has come from either like stage acting or drama college or something like that, it's about the freedom and all that stuff. But like this is the only form of performance that I've ever known. So I've never been in any of those worlds. And I guess when you explicitly say out like that, right, the rules telling you what to do and all this stuff, like that would, like if you try to apply it to this,
but it would gets applied to this all the time in TV and
TV. I'm sure, yeah.
Increasingly find that really frustrating. And I don't think I produce my best work in TV. I think I've got better at it, and I've learnt to essentially stifle the instinct, the creative instinct in me. And a lot of the time it's to do with the studio audience. You know, a lot of the time you're having to repeat things, you're having to do them again because they've changed words, all of that sort of thing. And the instinct in me is like, there's an audience in front of me here that are bored shitless, or they're annoyed, or like they're going like, why am I listening to this again twice? I'm not entertaining this audience. The standard is not good enough for this audience, and you're having to override that constantly because TV doesn't give a shit about the studio audience. It's like, well, they're just filler. They're just people here, and actually, my entire everything about me is like these people in front of me need to enjoy this. They've come. Their evening is this, and so often things are written by committee, or you kind of get them kind of just as they're about to go on because they've had to be rewritten for all sorts of different reasons, often legal ones, and I find that really frustrating. And as I say, I've got better at dealing with it, and I can do it, but I hadn't realised before this tour how much I'd missed just being able to go, well, this is what I want to say, I'm going to say it. And that's it. You know, there's nobody going like, should we maybe rewrite that word, like all of that shit. You just go like, fuck off. Yeah, you go and think about it. But I don't glean any pleasure from that. I'm not getting any creative enjoyment from poring over something. It's like it needs. I can, on my own terms, I can do that. You know, I work hard on my shows and I think about how they should be written and how whatever. But the real joy, is when you're out there just in flow. Great.
Free.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, because you see a lot of people who work a lot in TV, whether it's guesting on shows or presenting shows or doing their own shows. Stand-up will take quite a bit of a back seat or even be left behind a bit. So
yes.
Is that why you kind of, still
yeah,
stand up indoors?
It's the best.
Yeah.
The only thing that sort of has come close actually recently is I did a live TV show about Pride, a thing for Channel 4, and I've said for a while that I really enjoy live TV because it gets closest to the live experience, because again, once you're on, you know, and you can start to break it a little bit, and if you don't like a bit of script, then you just don't do it, you know. It's that kind of thing once you're out there. And I loved that, really got a buzz from that, and loved that liveness of it, and the fact that midway through a line, you know, it could just be thrown to a part or whatever, I could just sort of break out of it if I felt instinctively like that might be fun, and I could just say something over here and then come back to the auto cue and go, what am I saying again? You know,
yeah.
And that's kind of the fun bits for me. That's what I love. Whereas when you're in a studio and something that's pre-recorded, and it's the fault of TV being so kind of perfect a lot of the time, is that audiences expect now when they turn on the TV, they expect, if it's pre-recorded, if you watch something like 8 out of 10 Cats or whatever, you're expecting particularly the host, to deliver the line perfectly and not to break out of it and not to stumble or whatever. You never see a stumble in a host on a pre-recorded thing. But people stumble all the time, and often that leads to amazing things. But if you are aware that a stumble will result in an extra record, you get in your head a lot, or at least I do. So suddenly everything's really sad because you're just in your head the whole time. And I was constantly trying to find ways of making it better, and actually I sort of arrived at the decision that, like, I just don't really enjoy hosting studio shows. It's just like, you know, that's just not for me, in the same way that I don't really enjoy, you know, cycling. I had a go. It's not for me. But so I'm trying to find ways of, with studio shows, getting better at it, and yeah, not being too. You know, there are ways of doing it that aren't too obsessed with being perfect, I suppose.
If to wrap up the story about your first gig.
God, were we still on that? We've gone on a real tangent.
Well, yeah, we've gone some nice little avenues. But if we could go. We're backstage at the Comedy Store. Jack Whitehall's just warned you about the heckler on the right. But if you today, as we are now, could jump into that room with you back then as well, what do you think you'd say? We don't have to worry about any butterfly effects or anything like that.
Yes.
If you had a moment with yourself.
I don't think I'd change anything. I think that I'd just be like, go for it, enjoy it. You know. Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I've really enjoyed so much. Things have fallen in front of me that I've been very lucky to have, and yeah, I don't think I could have played it any differently. Really, I don't. Yeah, so I don't know what I'd say other than, like, God, you look thin. You're like, don't. Yeah, you think you're fat right now. Fucking hell, give yourself 15 years.
You long for this body.
You've got a long way to go, kid. I think.
There we go. Well, Joe Lycett, thank you for chatting about your first gig.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
There we have it. Round of applause from everybody in the studio audience. Thank you. Thank you so much. Cheers, guys. Thank you so much. Joe Lycett, everyone. Give it up for Joe Lycett. Come on. Yeah. Oh, I just got a reflection in the door and I thought there was somebody else cheering. I was like, there's not actually people here. I'm in a house on my own and it's, I realize how scared I am in houses on my own. I see mice all the time. I see rats all the time. I see people all the time. I hear people all the time. And I would prefer to be broken into, I've realised. I'd prefer someone to walk up the stairs and I go, I can hear them, than if I was, say, sitting in the sitting room and someone just stood at the window in the garden just staring at me, just going. Because then you feel trapped a bit. At least if they're in the house, you know where they are. You just do a little Home Alone on them and you scoot out the window. This way they're going to go, you're in there. We know where you are. I'm out here. You can stay in there with me out here. Or you can come out here with me out here. Where'd you go? Joe Lycett. What a podcast. Hope you had fun. Hope you like listening to it. All the plugs again. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, /My First Gig Pod. If you're watching on YouTube, hi. Next week doesn't have a video. I'll have video, but the guest will be audio only. I'm going to tell you who the guest is. I think I'm going to start doing that at the end of the episodes. I'm going to say next week's guest, but I'm not going to say it on social media until the Monday of. When I'm putting out saying, hey, it's on Patreon now, then I'll publicly say the guest. But if you listen to this end part, you will hear the guest. And my guest next week is the fantastic, the wonderful, the one of a kind, Ireland's own Alison Spittle. Alison is a fantastic comedian, living in London now. Just finished her run of Wet at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And delighted to share her story. She was, I don't know, I touched upon it at the start of the episode with her. When I started, she was, she had done some really fun things and done some good things. Like she'd had success for sure, but she was still kind of on the, she wasn't quite through that next level yet. She was doing well within the confines of like the scene that we were in. And she soon broke out of that and like is now, when she comes back and does gigs for us, it's so good because wow, she's done these TV shows. She's writing on UK TV. She's touring, all these other things. So I've known her story, knowing her personally from not her early days, but I've seen the rise of her from her kind of, right, I've established myself here in this initial place. Now I got to go on further. And she's been doing so well. Top podcast on BBC Sounds, so many fun things. But I didn't know that prior story on how she got there. So it was very nice to, complete the story for me. And it's a very fun story. Alison's a great guest. We recorded it at Cherry Comedy in Whelan's before she performed a couple of months ago. I think it was probably the June bank holiday weekend. I think it was just after Kilkenny Cat Laughs. I might have that wrong. But yeah, Cherry Comedy. If you are in Dublin, Cherry Comedy every single Monday night in Whelan's. It is the club I run and has so many great guests. TripAdvisor considers us the number one nightlife activity. So the tourists like it. If you're a tourist, come see it. If you're not a tourist, lad, it's right there. It's under a tenner. But yeah. That's all the plugs. Guys, thanks so much for listening. It's great to be back. And it's great to be doing this again. I love getting the chance to talk to these people and hearing their stories, because you could listen to 100 podcasts with the same guest and they're going to say the same thing. And that's fine, because those are the interesting questions. And that's why those are the ones that'll be listened to a million times more than this. So as niche as this is, I love those little questions. Like, right, yeah, it was great to film a Netflix special, but what were you working as when you did your first gig? What was the plan? Where was your life? So if you like these, any kind of support you can, even if it's just telling a friend to check it out. If you just know someone who likes watching Joe Lycett videos on YouTube, go, hey, listen to this, hear how it all started for him. And yeah, myfirstgigpod.com. At Duane Doogan is me. Follow me if you like what I'm saying, you know? I don't don't remember. Did I sign this off a certain way? Because I love familiarity, especially in podcasts. I love the little catchphrases. I love the little nuances that happen every week. I think that's what we all recognize and enjoy. That's why we love songs so much. Once they're catchy and they're in your head, you like to sing along. Did I just mansplain songs to a podcast audience? Oh, time to go. Goodbye, goodbye, good friends, goodbye. And if that's what my brain defaulted in, I listened to the start of all these episodes. That's what I knew what to say at the start. I never listened to the end of any episodes. And the second I did that, I'm going to go, I definitely did that before, because I'm a basic bitch, predictable, no original thought, just one trick pony. I love that it's like, hey, so happy to be back. And I'm about to sign off, berating myself for being a hack and just overall shite. Guys, my first gig, it's back. We're back next week. Alison Spittle, tell your friends. I'm going to go, because I think it's just going to get darker. This is an insight into my soul that I didn't think that we needed to see. So on that note, I'm Duane Doogan for my first gig. Goodbye. Mother of God.
It's the My First Gig podcast. Whoa.
You've been listening to My First Gig with Duane Doogan on Acast. Follow online at My First Gig Pod or at Duane Doogan. For classic episodes, ad-free, early access and more, head to myfirstgigpod.com. This is My First Gig with Duane Doogan, powered by Acast. Enjoy.